During the show last night, we were able to report on the arrest of the 9th suspected member of a terroristic militia group who was allegedly planning an attack on law enforcement officers and planning to wage war against the United States government. Police say Joshua Matthew Stone was hiding inside a rural Michigan home when police played messages over a loudspeaker from his family and friends urging him to surrender. He did so peacefully. Mr. Stone was arraigned today. So here are all 9 of the alleged militia members who have been arrested and now indicted. One of the 9 is a man named Christopher Sickles. According to the federal indictment against him, Mr. Sickles also goes by the name Pale Horse. He appears to have made a pretty overt, traceable footprint online over time. As the rest of the militia movement and the right-wing anti-government fringe in this country tries to distance itself from this Hutari militia and these people who've been arrested, we don't actually just have to take their word from it. Some of the evidence is available, open source, online for anyone to see. To that end, I want to show you a bit of a video that was reportedly posted online in October 2008. This is just before the 2008 election. And it was posted online by an Ohio militiaman who called himself Pale Horse. It's since been taken down, but here's an excerpt of it that was played on Ed Schultz's show last year.
Hello, America. It's your wake-up call from the Ohio militia. If people need to wake up, start buying some of these, see? Ask yourself, why do you not have one of these? Go out and buy a gun, okay? They're not that expensive, okay? You can get a gun, buy lots and lots of ammo for these guns, okay?
Southern Poverty Law Center is a group that monitors militias and extremist groups. They took note of that video and others that were posted to the now defunct Ohio Militia website back in April of last year. They noticed that one of those videos included a shout out from the Ohio militia to the Michigan militia. Quote, "Thanks for letting us train at Camp Stassa with you guys." Camp Stassa thought to be a Michigan militia training ground. Now, when the Hutari suspects were all rounded up and arrested over the weekend and last night, all the other militia movements rushed to distance themselves from this group of people who was being hauled off to jail. But even amid the militia movement's rush to declare, those arrested guys don't have anything to do with us, even amid that rush came an admission from the spokesman for the Southeast Michigan Volunteer Militia that the Hutari trained with them on at least a couple of occasions. So you're getting a sense of the connections here, right? This guy, Christopher Pale Horse Sickles, gets arrested as a member of Hutari. He has an online record in which he appears to be the man describing himself as being associated with the Ohio militia. He connects himself and is connected by other militia members in that state to Michigan militias. Now, Michigan militias have a heck of a history. In 2005, this decade, 2005, a Michigan militia member named Norman David Somerville was sentenced for possessing and distributing more than a dozen machine guns. In 2003, a Michigan state trooper was shot and killed in a standoff with a Michigan militia member named Scott Woodring, who was himself fatally shot by troopers a week later. A Michigan militia member named Paul Darland was convicted in 2001 of the fatal shooting of another militia member's bodyguard. And, of course, most infamously, Terry Nichols, a Michigan native, and Timothy McVeigh attended at least one Michigan militia event before the Oklahoma City bombing. Even the Michigan militia folks admit to that. What else is this Pale Horse guy known for online? Watch this short clip and see if this rings a bell.
Here's my idea. We have a 1 million man armed militiaman march on Washington. A peaceful demonstration of at least 1 million. Hey, if we can get 10 million, even better. But at least 1 million armed militiamen marching on Washington. A peaceful demonstration, no shooting, no one gets hurt, just a demonstration. The only difference from any typical demonstration is we will all be armed.
That, again, is the man identifying himself as Pale Horse, who we think, but cannot confirm, is the same Pale Horse who was arrested this weekend as a member of the Hutari militia and accused of plotting an assault on police officers and to wage war against the United States government. That's a man calling himself Pale Horse, calling for a 1 million militiaman armed march on Washington. He wants people to show their weapons, bring their firearms to Washington, D.C. for a march on the Capitol. Does that idea sound familiar at all? Of course, Pale Horse's armed march on Washington didn't happen. He was calling for it to take place on July 4th of last year. Instead, though, an armed march on Washington is going to happen this year, on April 19th. on the 15th anniversary of the bombing of the Oklahoma City Federal Building by Timothy McVeigh. How did we come to know about this current planned armed march on Washington? Or march on as close as these people think they could legally get to Washington? We found out about it because the guy who's calling for people to throw bricks through Democratic Party headquarters around the country, a former militia leader from Alabama, is a keynote speaker at the Armed March on Washington event. I can already feel the common wisdom congealing around this story, that these militia members who were arrested were part of some offshoot, unique, standalone religious cult that has nothing to do with anything else that's going on in the world of anti-government extremism in this country right now. But if you just scratch the surface of the story, just barely scratch it, that common wisdom falls apart. Joining us now is Dave Neiwert. He's the author of In God's Country, a book about the Patriot movement. He's also the author of The Eliminationists, How Hate Talk Radicalized the American Right. He's also managing editor of a website I like a lot, which is called Crooks and Liars. Mr. Neiwert, thanks very much for coming on the show. It's nice to have you here.
Always a pleasure, Rachel.
So we're coming up on this planned armed carry march on Washington on the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. These folks say they're going to show up to D.C. with guns. What do you expect to happen that day, and do you think that's an important occasion?
Probably not. I mean, I expect there to be probably more people than showed up for the million-man militia march of last summer, which we covered at the time. You know, we wrote about it at the time that they were talking about this, and we said that they were probably just shooting off a lot of hot air. And sure enough, you know, as far as anybody knows, nobody showed up in D.C. on July 4th of last year. But I expect there will probably be a few more. You know, I was in D.C. just about a week and a half ago and I was there on Sunday for the immigration march, the March for America, and that attracted about 200,000 people at least, but it got very little coverage. So I'll predict this. There will be a lot fewer people than there were for the March for America, but I bet it gets a lot more coverage than the March for America did.
Well, the charges against the Hutari militia in Michigan, and frankly, my coverage of this planned event for April 19th, the charges suggest that authorities are very much concerned about domestic terrorism. I'm covering the April 19th march, not because I think it's going to be giant, but I think that it's a sort of red flag that there's something going on in terms of anti-government extremism right now, and the potential for domestic terrorism. Do you think there's a reason we don't hear more about it in our politics right now?
Well, a lot of it is the fact, I mean, this is something, you know, Rachel, I've been writing about the extremist right since the 1990s, and it's not been an easy road to hoe as a freelancer because it's very difficult to sell these kinds of stories. I think in the mainstream media, this kind of narrative really runs counter to what a lot of people want to talk about, especially when we talk about terrorism. You know, I think it's very popular to sort of conceptualize terrorists as when somebody with a turban and brown skin, especially since September 11th. But the reality is, as we remember from April 19th, 1995, is that far more often the terrorists that we encounter in this country are people who look like our neighbors.
Dave, in terms of the overall, the way this fits overall into politics, are there moderating influences in the sort of anti-government wing of the conservative movement right now, the more mainstream part of the anti-government wing, who are trying to draw a hard line against extremist rhetoric that might encourage folks that are inclined toward terrorist tactics?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, there are always the David Frums out there, the folks who have at least, you know, they're traditional Republicans and traditional conservatives, and I think that they understand that the extremist right is very much a threat to conservatives as much as it is to liberals. I mean, if nothing else, it's going to destroy the name of the American right for the next decade if these people, if the extremist right really gains control of the conservative movement.
Dave Neiwert, thank you very much for coming on the show. Author of the book The Eliminationists, managing editor of Crooks and Liars. It's great to see you, Dave. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Rachel.